Avengers Endgame has done it. It is the biggest film ever. It has overtaken Avatar's world box office record. Disney reported that it only needed another $500,000 after Friday. We've just got the Saturday US domestic box office figures released, and it has earned that, and they've also revised up slightly the international box office by another $100,000, and also the Sunday projected figures are out. So right now, the official total, according to everyone, Box Office Mojo, Numbers.com, and Disney, is that Avengers Endgame has $2,790,216,193. In the US domestic market, it got $854,216,193. So it is the second film ever to go past the $850 million mark there. And internationally, it is still an estimated number here. We've got a whole pile of zeros at the end. But right now, the number out of Buena Vista is it has earned $1,936 million internationally. As I've been saying for many videos now, Box Office Mojo and the Numbers.com were disagreeing on how much money Avatar earned in the international market. Disney came out yesterday at the Comic Convention to clarify how much money Avatar actually earned. Both the figures that the Numbers.com and Box Office Mojo were using were incorrect, and they have now changed what their website reports to use the figure just out of Disney. So we can see here are the top 5 movies according to the Numbers.com at the top there, and Box Office Mojo at the bottom. Box Office Mojo very recently, about an hour ago, was still saying that Avengers Endgame was not the biggest film of all time and had it listed at number 2. They had a different total for Avengers Endgame. So they were using the new Avatar figure, which Disney says is correct, but they actually had a much smaller figure for Endgame even after they had updated it, and then they've actually changed the figures. I'm guessing they've went in manually to do something they don't normally do, because you can see here on their listing, Endgame is at the top, but the actual rank says it's still number 2. So I guess they'll go through and fix that, but it was until very recently still number 2, because I guess they had to manually input these new figures from Disney. I guess it looks pretty bad if Disney comes out to say that Avengers Endgame is the number 1 film ever, and Box Office Mojo disagrees with the actual distributor. So they've changed things up, and now they're both agreeing that Avengers Endgame is the biggest film of all time. It has earned more money than Avatar. So how did this happen? Well, basically the re-release did it, and in combination with Spider-Man. So it is difficult to say it was just the re-release, but the re-release was done the week before Spider-Man came out. The combination of those two things has given a massive boost to what Endgame's box office looked like it was going to be. Here we can look at this chart, which shows the Endgame box office versus the Infinity box office for around about the last 8 weeks or so, not quite 8 weeks there. And we can see that they were in line for about a week there at the start, and then Endgame was earning less money than Infinity War, and the blue line just drops away from the red line. And then there is a spike up. That's where the Endgame re-release happened, and we can see now that they've both earned around about the same amount of money, a little bit more for Endgame in this period of time here on the chart, whereas it did look like before Endgame was re-released, before the spike up, that Infinity War would out-earn Endgame in this period of their box office run. So you can see how many millions of dollars extra here it actually got. It's probably got somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million extra so far in the US domestic market. And obviously its box office run isn't over yet. It's just overtaken Avatar officially, but it's still out. You can still earn a lot more money from here, or maybe not a lot more, but it can earn millions of dollars more from where it is right now. And here on the international figures, we can see what kind of drastic increase the re-release also had there. We can see on the right-hand side, we have the change in percentage from the Sunday international earnings. After the first week, it dropped 18.9%, then it dropped 72%, and then after that, it was basically losing about 50% each week, roughly. It lost 57, then it lost 57, then it lost 47, then it lost 53, then only lost 31, and then it lost 46%. And that amount of money there, the 46.6%, the $3.1 million, that was the amount of money earned just before the re-release to the Sunday. So the next week after that, when it was re-released, you can see a complete reverse on what was happening. It didn't get a 50% reduction, it had a 58% increase. And then the week after that, it didn't have a 50% reduction, it had only a 6% reduction. And the week after that, it still didn't have a 50% reduction. It had an 8.7% increase. And then the week we've just got right now, it got $6.4 million compared to the $5 million in the previous week. Again, not a 50% reduction, a 28% increase. So after it's been re-released with the extra stuff, and again, after Spider-Man has also been released, things completely changed in the foreign market as well. So not only was there a drastic reversal of how much money it earns in the US domestic market, same thing overseas, in fact, more so, and you can see here just drastically how much money it was. It was looking like it would probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of another $3 or $4 million total, when it was actually re-released, and it got $4.9 million just in the week after that, and again another 4, another 5, another 6. So it's earned somewhere in the neighborhood again of about $20 million extra so far than what it looked like it was probably going to get in the foreign market. So how much more money can it earn in the foreign market from this point on? I think it's impossible really to project anything out. It should be getting around about 50% of the money that it had from the week before. Okay, that's roughly what pretty much every film does after their second week. They get somewhere in the neighborhood of a 50% reduction. Okay, maybe it'll only be 30, maybe it'll be 60%, but something like that. And here, again, we can see quite clearly for the last 4 weeks, it's earned about the same kind of money, except it's also went up a little bit. Now, I assume that's basically because it's being released in different foreign markets at different times. The actual information on that's very hard to come by, but that's the only thing that actually makes sense to me as to how this can happen. That is that more countries are showing it as other countries stop showing it, which has kept the number pretty much the same. And all of these figures here also don't include China. So China only showed the film for 4 weeks. It didn't renew the film after its 4-week period, and it hasn't decided to show the extra stuff as well. So it could earn a lot more money if it was shown in China. I've not heard of any Chinese release date for it, but China normally takes about a month to actually negotiate when films will be released there. But I'm sure it's something that Disney would want to do. It is worth millions of dollars extra, but again, haven't heard that that's going to actually happen. But again, without China, this is what's happened here. I mean, you still need to stick with conventional wisdom and say it's going to half the money next week and get something like $3.2 million. But I said that last week, I said that the week before, and I said that the week before that. And no, it didn't do it. So can it get another $5 million next week? Well, it's done that so far, so I guess it can. I still think, as I said last week and the week before, that it'd be difficult to think that's what's going to happen. But that is what's happened. And again, I think that's why it's difficult to project out what will happen from here. But it's going to earn more money. It's going to earn millions of dollars more in the international market, but very difficult to tell if it's just going to be a little bit amount of money or quite a lot more. I mean, I could still see that maybe it could get another $20 million from this point forward. I think that's more money than it'll earn, but I can definitely see that that could happen if this continues on. In the US domestic markets, I've put Force Awakens back on here again with the raw numbers. I gave up comparing Endgame to Force Awakens after Force Awakens overtook it because it was released at a different point in time and it's got a slightly different fan base, whereas Infinity War released at the exact same point in time, exact same fans. It's a really good film to compare it to. But right now, after the re-release, Endgame has been earning more money than The Force Awakens. So The Force Awakens earned a total of $936 million. And right now on this Sunday, which is projected for day 87, it's got $930 million. So it's got about $6 million more from this point in time onwards. And again, Endgame's earning around about the same or maybe a little bit more. So it's plausible that Endgame will get around about another $6 million or perhaps a little bit under that. You can see it's getting a little bit less this weekend than what Force Awakens actually earned on the previous weekend. But weekdays it is far out earning The Force Awakens because at this point in time, Force Awakens was no longer in a holiday period, whereas Endgame is in a holiday period. But again, $6 million, that's how much extra money Force Awakens got from here on out. I think that's a reasonable amount of money that Endgame might get, which could bring its total to $860 million. If you look at Infinity War, it's out earning Infinity War a bit more than 2 times right now, but also 3 times, so somewhere between 2 to 3 times. And Infinity War got a total of $678.8 million. And right now, on day 87, it has $676.8 million. So it's got about another $2 million to go. So Endgame's going to earn probably 2 to 3 times that much, which brings us to another $4 to $6 million, similar to the $6 million of Force Awakens got. So I think that's a reasonable amount to expect. Another $6 million or so for Endgame in the US domestic market. And for anybody that's a hardened Avatar fan that's unhappy with Avengers Endgame unseating Avatar, here are the inflation-adjusted US domestic totals. Avengers Endgame is currently the 16th biggest film ever with inflation, and Avatar is number 15. Avatar has an inflation-adjusted total of $876 million. Avengers Endgame currently on $854. As I said, it might get another $6 million. I really don't think it can do anything to overtake Avatar with inflation. So Avatar will still be ahead of Endgame. It'll be the 15th biggest film with inflation, and both of them obviously nowhere near number 1 up there, Gone with the Wind, $1.8 billion. And if we look at the worldwide inflation-adjusted totals, we've got Avatar there, number 3, $3.2 billion with inflation, whereas Endgame has the $2.7 billion. So Avatar still has more money than Endgame with inflation. Now, the number here for Star Wars is $2.7 billion. That's a kind of middling amount of money. That's probably around about what it had, but there are figures out there for Star Wars having $3.3 million with inflation. So the international figures are sort of all over the place, as they were for Avatar with the Box Office Mojo and the Numbers.com, and then putting inflation on these older films, you get a fair bit of wiggle room. So there's an argument to be made that Star Wars with inflation has still earned more money than Endgame, and there's an argument to be made that Endgame has earned more than Star Wars. But Endgame has certainly earned more money than E.T., and it has certainly earned less money than Avatar. So right now, it is either the 4th biggest film ever with inflation, or the 5th biggest film with inflation, and it may get a few more $1 million, but it certainly won't move past Avatar. So going forward, the only real question left is, will anything ever beat Endgame's non-inflation adjusted record? Will there ever be another film as big as Endgame? Well, to start with, I think Avatar will retake the title from Endgame, unless there's some sort of film released in 2020 that we don't really know about yet that actually takes the record. That could happen. But Avatar, I believe, when Avatar 2 is released in 2021, will be re-released, and it will overtake Endgame. Endgame will probably only have about $10 million over Avatar's total, if it's that much. Avatar will clearly earn more than $10 million in a re-release. So Avatar will retake the number 1 position. Maybe Endgame will then be re-released and so on. We got this weird battle between the two. But looking past these two films, is there another film that could perhaps beat Endgame or Avatar? Or is this it? That these films just such a big amount of money they've earned that nothing will ever do it? Well, there is an argument to be made that, yes, nothing ever will beat them because of the changing US demographics and the changing viewing habits in the US market. And that's been happening for a long time. Gone with the Wind is still the biggest film there in inflation-adjusted terms because there wasn't even television back when it was out. Everybody went to the movies all the time compared to now. So there's a lot more distractions for people to do other than go to the movies. So less and less percentage of people do go to the movies now. So in the US domestic market, it's going to be difficult for films to earn the kind of money that Endgame earned. That's true. But more and more of the money is actually earned in the international market. Okay, according to the Motion Picture Association's report from 2018, their latest report, the US market is now only a quarter of the worldwide market. Okay, now some of that worldwide market is in non-English speaking films, obviously, but a quarter of the box office is from the US market. So yes, the US market is kind of shrinking. It is more difficult for bigger films to beat the records in the US market, but internationally things are changing the other way. And so yes, films will be bigger than Endgame. They may not beat Endgame's US domestic total of about $850 million, but it's not number 1 there anyway. The Star Wars Force Awakens is the number 1 film in the US domestic market without inflation. But there'll be films that earn more than this $2.79 billion. Again, if inflation isn't used, give it enough time, every film will be earning that kind of money. But also the international market is where it's all basically at. So particularly the Chinese market, that will propel films to beat Endgame. So Endgame will not be the biggest film of all time for here on out, but it may very well remain as the 2nd biggest film ever in the US market. Okay, The Force Awakens may stay at number 1. Endgame may very well stay at number 2 there. That might happen because of the changing demographics and viewing patterns. But internationally, the exact opposite is happening. More and more people internationally are spending more and more money on movies. So Endgame will definitely be beaten at some time. I have no idea by what, other than Avatar, I believe, will actually beat it in 2021. But other than that, I don't know what's going to beat it. I don't know what films are coming out. But something will beat Endgame. Endgame will not have the record forever, but it is conceivable that Endgame and Avatar will have the record for, 10 years between them. Something like that. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.